All right, everybody, make sure that you are turned to the right slide page in your notes, which is page 5. Looks like this. Okay. Page 5, and we're at the bottom. Hopefully you did the game. I pray that worked well for you, and it should be a really good introduction into all the different parts of the organelles, which we're going to further and more deeply discuss here, okay? So the game was able to give you some introductory practice as well as starting to learn what each of the little organelles in a cell, what its name is and what its function is, okay? That was the purpose of that. And then you were supposed to take a screenshot of your final grade certificate thing, and then you were supposed to submit that as at the end of these notes. So keep that someplace safe. You don't have to print it, just submit it with these notes, okay? All right. So, so other animal organelles that we're going to continue with. We left off on the nucleus. We talked about the cell membrane, the nucleus last time. So now we're going to move on and talk about cilia and flagella. Now, these are not typically found in cells of a multicellular organism. Typically. All over is what I'm saying. Because many cells don't have these, but a few do. So the cells that line your bronchial tubes and the inside of your lungs, they have cilia. Little, short, hair-like structures that flap and act like little oars to, in this case, move the cell around. But in our case, they're not used for movement. In our case, they're used to move substances over a cell. So this is more like what your lung cells would look like. And they wave like this, and they move things like mucus or pieces of dust that you may breathe in, fine particles and things like that. They move it here and there. Every once in a while, you have to go, you have to cough, okay? Because there's like mucus in your throat. Well, these cilia did that. They put that mucus there to get rid of it, because the mucus captured a whole bunch of stuff that you breathed in, and your body can't process that stuff, and so they make it come out through your throat, and then you cough it, and usually you swallow it. Sometimes you spit it out. That's pretty gross, I know. But hey, being a living organism is pretty gross if you think about it, okay? And then, so that's the cilia. And in some cases, like the paramecium, they're used to swim through the water. I think I'll show you a video or an animation of that in a little while. And then you have the flagella. Flagella, so that's these two. The cilia are in some animals, and the flagella are in some animals as well. Like the euglena that we discussed in the last notes. But in sperm cells, which are the male reproductive cell that has to swim from where it is deposited into the fallopian tube of the female, where the egg is waiting for it to fertilize, it needs some way to get there. It can't walk, can't take a taxi, okay, or an Uber. It has to swim upstream. And all the power to make that thing continuously flip like this and swim and propel itself is found in that part of the cell right there, okay? So it's just interesting pieces that we really haven't discussed yet in our notes or in that game that you played. Learning game, let's just say. All right, then there are some organelles that are plant specific. We're going to go back to the animal ones so that you have more practice knowing about those. The endoplasmic reticulum and the Golgi complex and those types of things. But plant-specific ones are important too to understand. So plants have cell walls. Animals don't. We don't have cell walls. That's what makes plants sturdy. We have a skeleton that makes us sturdy. But still, we don't, we're squishy. We don't have, if you did this to a plant leaf, it would break and you wouldn't be able to go back to the normal shape again. Or, if you did this to a twig, it would snap, right, and break. And because they have cell walls in their cells, we don't, all right? Now, the cell wall is non-living. It's made out of, and you should know what it's made out of, cellulose, a glucose polymer. A few weeks back, we talked about how the beta glucose molecules, one flips over, and they make long, long chains and long, long sheets. That's what cellulose is. If you're writing on your paper right now, on your notes, that's cellulose. That came from plants. Wood, chopped up, really fine particles, and then laid out in sheets, wet, and it all sticks together. It's really kind of amazing how they do it. I think they use heat too to make it. It's just paper. It's just wood is what I'm saying. It's just cellulose. So now its purpose is to support and protect the cell, and it's found outside of the cell membrane. So here is the a plant cell, okay, and so they take a little screenshot, of that tiny piece and blow it up, and you've got the, you don't have to know about these layers here, just know that this is what the cell wall looks like. And then down here is the plasma membrane, the cell membrane, the lipid bilayer, which is on the inside. So plant cells still have a lipid bilayer, a cell membrane, but then outside of that, they have this protective layer, protective, rigid, non-living layer called a cell wall, okay? They also have a large central vacuole. Animals have a few little vacuoles, but only plants have a large central vacuole. So here, animal cell, no large vacuole, but plant cells have this huge one, and it's usually for water storage, okay? It's like a big balloon inside the cell. And like I said, it's either small or absent in animal cells. And then they have these things called plastids. And there's 3 different kinds. You really have to know about the first one there, the chloroplast, but I'm going to mention the other 2. So these organelles are involved in the production or synthesis of food and storing it, okay? So the leukoplasts are storage. They don't have any, leuko means white, so they don't have any color at all. No pigment. Pigment means color, like pigments like paints. Chromoplasts, they have carotenoids, and those are reds, oranges, and yellow pigments. And you can see these things in fruit and flowers, carrots and pumpkins, for example, okay? Those colors are carotenoids, the cells called chromoplasts. But you can also see the chromoplasts come out or be visible. They don't come out, but they become visible in the fall when the leaves change. Now down here in South Florida, we don't get too much of that, but when you go up to central and northern Florida, and of course above, there are different species of trees there, especially in the mountains of North Carolina, in Georgia, or further up in New England, okay? You're gonna get beautiful whole forests. Like right about now, this time of year actually, is probably in the next few weeks, is gonna be the best time to go see the color change for the fall. And you'll be able to see all the reds and the yellows and the oranges, pigments, all the chromoplasts come out and be visible. And then of course the chloroplasts. These are the ones responsible in plants for making energy, for capturing solar light, energy from 93 million miles away at the sun. They turn that energy into glucose. Now, also, they have to have carbon dioxide to do that, right? And water, but the whole photosynthesis reaction. And and they're also used to store the glucose as well. So those are the plastids. Chromoplasts, for example, carrot root cells, they're filled with orange pigment called carotene. And again, they make pigments, and they store pigments, colors. The colors help to capture solar energy, different wavelengths of solar energy. Did you know that blue light is the best wavelength for plants? Blue. That's why sometimes in greenhouses or hydroponic growth chambers, you'll see a bluish kind of light instead of just a white light or yellow light. The chloroplasts here, the sun's rays, all right, they're found only in producers. A producer is we haven't got to that yet. When we talk about ecology, we will talk about producers. You probably learned about it in middle school, but that was a long time ago. So those are the ones that are at the bottom of the food chain that produce the energy for the rest of the food chain. Okay, so you've got the grass, that's a producer, a photosynthesizer, and then you've got the cow that eats the grass, and then the person that eats the cow. So, you know, where do we get our energy from? Not really from the cow, but from the plant. But not really from the plant, do we? From the sun, okay? So the sun is the key point there. But anyway, the chloroplasts are found in those producers. And they have the chlorophyll. Chlorophyll is a pigment, it's a green pigment. Do you ever get grass stains on your pants when you're playing outside, okay? Sports or whatever, okay, or when you were younger. The grass stain is when you landed on the grass or the plants, you crushed the cells open and you spread that chlorophyll pigment onto your clothes. And it's organic, so the soaps that you put in the laundry detergent, when you rub the Tide or whatever into the grass stain, it breaks it apart chemically, okay? And so that's pretty cool. You're never gonna find this in an animal cell, because that would be pretty cool too. Imagine you had some chlorophyll in your cells and you were hungry. You could just go outside and lay in the sun for 10 minutes and then wouldn't be hungry anymore. That's pretty wild. But then you'd have to be like a plant and breathe carbon dioxide, right? They use light energy, we said that already. They make glucose. And then they store the sun's energy in the chemical bonds of the glucose molecules. That's where the energy is stored. In the chemical bonds. Say it to yourself in your brain. The energy from the sun is stored in the chemical bonds of glucose. That's a very important concept. And then this is the last slide about chloroplasts. Again, we're on slide 24. They have a double membrane. So they don't just have like a single, remember, these are inside of a cell. This is not a cell. This is what's inside of a plant cell. It has its own DNA, which is pretty amazing. The outer membrane is smooth, and the inner membrane is connected to these stacks called thylakoids. These it looks like stacks of pancakes. They're called thylakoids. And stacks of them are called granum or grana. And then the interconnected parts are called stroma. But I don't think you have to know all those parts. I think what you really just have to know is what a chloroplast is and what it does. But just know that it's a very unique organelle, and it's only found in plants, okay? All right, so we're done with notes for today. That was really nice and fast. Your job is to recreate something like this in your notes, and it has to be, essentially, I'm looking for a work of art. So you need to use colors. I know your paper is blue, but that's fine. You can just make the blue darker or whatever. The directions for the colors should be in your notes as well on page, well, you're on the page, so you should see it, page 7, okay? And it tells you exactly what color to use for all the different organelles, all right? And the next 2 pages, you've got the plant cell and the animal cell, and that's what we're doing for the rest of the period so that you have more practice in being able to recognize the different parts of the cell. Because, hey, on your next test for this unit, you may have to simply look at this, you may have this picture again, and you may just have to simply label the parts and get them right, all right? And this is one way to do it. So in the end, it should look like this, except maybe even prettier, okay? And then your plant cell should look something like that. Just use the proper colors. And that's it. So get started on that artwork.